Okay, excellent. Distinguished delegates, experts, dear colleagues and friends, let's get started. My name is Steve O'Malley. I'm the United Nations Resident Coordinator ad interim for Kazakhstan. I'm extremely happy to be able to welcome you to this session, Charting the Path Forward, the UN at 80 and the Pact for the Future. And I would very much want to begin by thanking the government of Kazakhstan for organizing the Astana International Forum, bringing this incredible group of people from around the world together. I'm going to welcome our speakers today, and I'll go to my left here. First, Mr. Amandeep Singh Gill, Undersecretary General and the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for Digital and Emerging Technologies. Next to him, Mr. Akan Rahmatulin, the first Deputy Foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Kazakhstan. Ms. Aleshka Simkic, Ambassador of the European Union to the Republic of Kazakhstan, and Dr. Philippe Pollier, the Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations for Youth Affairs. So we have a very interesting panel from very diverse backgrounds and perspectives. This year marks the 80th anniversary of the United Nations, and through its history has many accomplishments. The support of the decolonization process that helped 80 countries, more than 80 countries, gain independence. The establishment of the Universal Human Rights Standards through the 1948 Declaration. The facilitation of the Paris Agreement, and acting as a cornerstone for peacekeeping, humanitarian aid, sustainable development, and the promotion of human dignity. Throughout, the UN has continued to be the only place on earth where all nations come together to discuss shared problems and seek solutions that serve the common good of humanity. But now we are living in a very complicated world, a so-called VUCA environment: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. We are seeing sharp reductions in funding that will impede the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. We are seeing widening geopolitical divisions and eroding trust. And indeed, the very value of multilateralism is being questioned. So, in September 2024, the UN member states agreed on and adopted a Pact for the Future, together with two key annexes, a Global Digital Compact and the Declaration for Future Generations, to renew the global commitment to multilateralism and address the pressing challenges of conflict, of inequality, of climate change. So this is what we want to discuss today. How do we go forward from this point we're in? How do we use what we have, and how do we reform what we have to move forward? So let us hear from our speakers and get right into it. We've given them each 7 minutes, and then we have microphones in the room, so we really want to open up the opportunity for people to ask questions, and we'll be very clear about that. We are going to stop at 4:50 so that we can get to our next meeting. I'll be very quick in my introductions of each speaker. Mr. Amandeep Singh Gill, as I said, Undersecretary General, Special Envoy for Digital Technologies since 2022, recognized by Time Magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in AI globally. In 2024, a wealth of experience in diplomacy and technology and global policy making. What challenges do you see for us, but also opportunities, I think is the thing we want to focus on to accelerate the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, and how to bridge this digital divide that we see not only between North and South, but within every society. Sir.
Thank you very much, Steve, and may I join you in thanking our gracious host from Kazakhstan for bringing us together. What an excellent start to this conference this morning. The President set the tone for all of us. So thank you. Thank you very much. And honored to be on this panel. Thank you for choosing such a pertinent theme. Challenges and opportunities. So that's a cliched lens often to look at where we are. I think what happened in September, Steve, you highlighted that. There was a once-in-a-generation opportunity to look at what are our global challenges, where does the UN fit in, where does the UN add value in addressing those challenges, and how do we move forward? So it was a process that kicked in some time back, 75th anniversary reflection. So it was matured in a nice way and came together in this consensus decision. The Pact was adopted, these two annexes, and in a sense, Felipe and I kind of represent those two annexes. And after a long time, the UN did some institutional innovation, setting up the Youth Envoy's Office, the Office for Digital and Emerging Technologies. So it's not only about global challenges, but also internal challenges, reform, a continuation of the process that Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General, had set in motion. His emphasis on UN 2.0, bringing data, digital technologies, so behavioral sciences in new ways to our working. So since then, we moved into a fresh weather front, more challenges, particularly around funding. But I'd like us to all think about this moment less in terms of resources, but more in terms of change of, let's say, operational mode and a shift in terms of ownership. Because too often the UN has been seen as driven by major groupings, major powers, and whereas it has always been a forum for the small and medium states in particular, the middle powers as the President called them this morning included, to protect their interests, to come together in interesting ways through the agencies, funds and programs, but also the broader forums under the UN to advance their own interests. So I would see this moment as a shift back to that broader vision of the UN, where we need to find ownership across a broader swathe of governments, but also civil society, academia, the private sector to address these challenges, including the challenge of technology, which is impacting us in fast and furious ways, and on which we need more international solidarity, more international cooperation than we realize. You know, I think we can come back to this later. So I would frame this challenge that way. That said, we have the 80th anniversary, and the Secretary General was very clear when we started to talk about at the senior levels in the UN, saying that this is not really a celebration, but let's use this moment to continue the reform process, the rejuvenation process, and looking for a more fit for purpose UN that delivers value to its stakeholders. You know, that's the point. And if that means, you know, achieving more efficiency, if that means rethinking some of the 3,000 plus mandates that member states have given over the years, so they've kind of layered up and resulted in some complexities, a lot of overlap. So there is homework to be done, there is some unpacking required, and you know, goodness knows, you know, we can be more efficient in the UN. So we can, if that means leveraging the RC system, one of our biggest assets is the resident coordinator system, the 132, you know, boots on the ground, our eyes and ears, but also active participants in the development journey of many, many countries. So those are the kind of let's say intermediate level challenges that we can use this anniversary to push on. And then at a deeper level, I think this is where we need to think about the UN as not only as a secretariat or the agencies with their own staff and so on, but also as what the member states are. I mean, the UN at the end of the day is an intergovernmental organization, treaty-based organization, and their member states need to reflect on where is the value add. And I'll end my 6-7 minutes by just bringing to you this with the concrete example of emerging technologies, AI in particular. So artificial intelligence, there's a lot that's happening in the private sector space. Some of it is regulated, some of it is autonomous in ways, but the private sector can indeed do some things at that layer. And then there's the national layer, or in some cases the EU AI Act, for example, there's the regional layer of governance where you are supporting good development and deployment. So it's regulation and development in some ways. And then there is a minimum irreducible global layer of governance. And that's where the UN becomes relevant. So if 118 countries are not participating in any of the leading AI governance initiatives, so we have to find a space for them. And that space is the UN. If all of Africa has less than 1,000 GPUs, and a single American company has 250,000 GPUs, we need a space where international solidarity can be used to bridge the AI divide. And if we have this fragmentation of approaches on governance, these tech wars and so on, we need a place where there is a global dialogue, where the rule makers, at least if they're not making a rule together, at least the rule makers in those other layers, those two layers, the domestic, the private sector, can come together and share their experiences, build a common vocabulary of governance, build interoperability that helps everyone. So I think that's the kind of value add of the UN in this space, which is seen as, oh, this is not subject to treaties as yet. I would draw your attention to the fact that international humanitarian law continues to apply. If you're thinking of lethal autonomous weapon systems, a negotiation I had the privilege of chairing for 2 years. So how do we reinterpret our existing obligation on gender? Because AI could take us back 100 years on respect for women, frankly. So how do we make sure that our existing laws, many of them, repositories, the UN Secretary General, are leveraged in this space. So I think if we stick with this kind of a value add, this kind of a networked, distributed multilateralism approach, which is strongly based in that kind of, larger majority of middle powers, small states, other stakeholders, then I think we are making the case that we made at the Pact and the summit in a more powerful way, even with this very challenging weather front that we are passing through. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you for kicking us off to such a great start and setting a high bar. So let me now turn to Mr. Akan Rakhmatulin, the first Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Kazakhstan, more than 3 decades of experience in diplomacy, including as Kazakhstan's permanent representative to the UN in New York, and leads the engagement with on multilateral and regional cooperation. I can say from the side of the UN, it is an honor and a pleasure to have you as the Deputy Minister that we work with. Sir.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you very much, colleagues. Dear participants, it's really a great honor and pleasure for me to address you today at this very interesting session. And since apart from me, we have 3 more speakers who are representing the international organization, let me speak from the point of view of the bureaucrat of the member states of the United Nations. And since we have the name of this session, Charting the Path Forward, UN at 80 and the Pact for the Future. And before charting the path forward, we have to understand where we are now. And everyone can understand that UN is now facing kind of tremendous issues, tremendous crisis. We can just enumerate them all, and and it may take, quite a long time to enumerate all the issues and all the, crises the United Nations, its membership faces this day, and how we could outline our way forward. Everyone understands that, and I'm speaking as the diplomat who served 3 times in New York in different positions with our mission to the United Nations. And here also I've been considered as the UN guy, or UN animal, so to say, at my ministry. Of course, there are different issues and different reasons for to have the United Nations the way we have it now. But many tend to blame the United Nations, the Secretariat, the Secretary General, that they're not doing properly, and they're doing something wrong, and they have lack of political will and so on. But I don't think, and I'm not agreeing with that. It's not about the power of the Secretary General of the UN Secretariat. It's numerous funds and programs. It's all about the member states, the composition, who forms their foreign policy, and who forms the way the United Nations, delivers in a way of, internally, I mean, in New York, in the headquarters, and on the ground. And many times I've been approached by just ordinary people, as we say, people from the street, from outside, and saying, so you work for UN, you know what UN is, but what's the use of UN? Why we have to pay that much contribution to that, and we see nothing from the United Nations? And this is way how the majority of people see that. And always I try to explain them that this is not about the, that once United Nations gets something from you, it would immediately return it back to you in the form of some kind of in-kind contribution or some services or whatsoever. The main strength of the United Nations, as we see it, is not about the Secretariat working there, though Secretariat is doing tremendous job, really great job, and I can witness that, and I can prove that, being in a close contact with Amandeep, with you back in New York, and with other colleagues. But it's about what the United Nations is doing on the ground. And that's why I really very much hopeful that United Nations will keep its services on the ground, and we see here many representatives of the United Nations in countries on the regional level. What to do? How to overcome this impasse? Sometimes it's really impasse. There are many different issues, as I mentioned, and we can enumerate them. Apart from the digital divide, the technological gap, we have conflicts, we have wars, we have some trade wars, including trade wars, climate change, and so many other things. Human rights violation. We have shortcomings in fulfilling our peacekeeping mandates in many various countries. So, and I like just to refer to what the former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said at today's plenary session, that the global challenges require global efforts. I think only with applying the global efforts we can work together on many domains. Also, I wanted to underline here the recent initiative proposed by Secretary General UN 80. It's about restructuring, reforming, and to optimize the work of the United Nations, to streamline its resources given the latest development in terms of funding, in terms of that many countries are reluctant to do that. And Amandeep, you mentioned that 3,000 plus mandates. Of course they have to be streamlined, and it's really a burden both for the United Nations and for its membership. Apart from that, we of course lack of trust and lack of respect to each other. The world is divided. We can see that. Right, we can understand that there is a war. The countries are fighting, countries are in conflict, but we can see that in some cases we can attain the peace but in some cases it's unattainable. It's again, it's not about the weakness of the United Nations, but it's the political will, sometimes political will of some individuals, not of the countries. So that's why to restore trust and confidence, it's really very important issue. And speaking about trust and confidence, I'm happy just to refer to one of the initiatives which Kazakhstan has tabled like 32 years ago. It's about convening the conference on confidence and interaction in Asia. Confidence building.
Conference on interaction and confidence building measures in Asia.
Such as, yes, and I'm really happy that my friend and colleague Kairat Saribay, he's Secretary General for that SICA, is here. I said that without giving me any side from him, but it's an instrument of, it's really how it works. And you can imagine, many of you know this SICA conference. It's about, uniting countries which are not happy to be with each other. I mean, in other platforms, but within SICA, like India and Pakistan, Israel, Palestine, and Iran are sitting in the same place, at the same table, and getting some tangible results. So it's mostly about the trust. The second issue I wanted to mention, it's about the, I'm sorry to say that, about the double standards. Double standards in the foreign policy of many countries. There is a saying, like in Russian maybe, all are equal, but sometimes some more equal than others. Yeah, and conflicts or parties of those conflicts are treated differently. And to avoid this, double standards, or avoid this duplication, selectivity, selective approach, it's quite a challenge. It is quite understandable that countries may have, as we say it, national egoism or some practicalities in fulfilling their duties. But overall, if these countries are keeping that way of, for example, selecting or singling out some conflicts over the others, it won't bring us to some tangible results, and I think it will never end. Speaking about reforms, our President mentioned today also the reform of the United Nations Security Council, and all agree that it doesn't, comply with the realities of today's realities. 5 countries having veto power, 10 countries elected every 2 years, 5 every 2 years, and it's really paralyzed. There are so many conflicts, and the United Nations Security Council is not able to produce any, decision or to settle up this conflict. And again, it's not about the Secretariat, it's not about those people who are in conflict, but it's about the lack of political will among those who are at the Security Council, among those who are taking this decision, those who are blocking the same decision. And trust restoration is really very important. I may also touch upon the issue of strengthening multilateralism, which we really lack, and strengthen the international cooperation, because it is really very sad but truth objective of today's day that countries are being separated and divided, relying on their own political preferences, geographical preferences. But again, we are all globalized, and it's not the, if we have problem in some part of our world, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have any kind of repercussion in other part of the world. So all is interconnected, and all is kind of, needed attention, equal attention. So I think with restored trust, with very relevant and very practical and wise reinvigoration of the United Nations system, its reform of the main bodies, Security Council, General Assembly, how we can make them work, how we may convince those countries who are in tension to sit at the table and talk. So these are the issues, and I think we don't have the recipe, the universal recipe how to solve this issue, but I think since we have quite a good, and enthusiastic people here, I mean here in the United Nations, in international organizations, and in the countries, the national governments, I think we can overcome that. And again, global challenges need global efforts, so let us mobilize these efforts and go and overcome these challenges. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that, Minister. And now it's my pleasure to give the floor to Her Excellency Aleška Simkic, the Ambassador of the EU to the Republic of Kazakhstan, also a long experience in the UN, in the OSCE, representing her home country at the UN, and in various roles at the EU as well. So, Aleška, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon. Thank you, Steve, for this introduction. And indeed, you have found in this panel somebody who maybe now represents, I would not say international organization, Mr. Deputy Foreign Minister, we like to call ourselves supranational organization. But in any case, I'm representing the European Union, but I am personally a big fan of the multilateral organizations for which I indeed worked for OSCE. I'm happy to actually know that there is a former Secretary General of the OSCE here. So it's also one pleasure to see known people from the organizations, and that's the beauty of the multilateral fora. And of course, Under Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, and you yourself, Deputy Foreign Minister, having been permanent representative and everything else. So I'm a big fan of OSCE, of the UN, and multilateralism in general. So that's whom you found on the panel today. And I appreciate the invitation. I had 3 points to say here. First point was actually taken from me by the leadership panel this morning, because President Tokayev, as well as all the presidents that spoke, have described the grim situation we are in as the world in terms of how international rules-based order is, I'm not going to say falling apart, that sounds too tragic, but it's really being questioned, it's really being put apart. And at the same time, we have, on the other hand, we have big challenges such as climate change, many conflicts that President Tokayev also counted, as well as other things that we have to deal with, poverty, so many humanitarian needs that are out there, etc. I don't want to draw the parallels, please do not misunderstand me, but we all know that a bit more than 8 years ago, so before the UN was established, escalation of such crisis has also happened. So the whole reason why the UN was established to prevent it again. And now we are seeing the escalations of some of the negative tendencies that have in the past century led to the establishment of the UN. So we have to prevent this to happen, or for the UN to dissolve. Somebody has even compared the UN to the League of Nations. I don't want to, but that is one thing that we have to really be cautious. And it's just one thought that I wanted to say. Since I'm representing the European Union here in Kazakhstan, I also want to draw the parallel between the European Union and the UN, because EU has been established a couple of decades or a decade later than the UN, but with the same purpose. Let's not ever have a war or conflict, and let's cooperate on the continent. And that's where I see one parallel. My second point is, second parallel that I see between the European Union and the UN is that it's constantly in crisis. I think that from the day that it started, the EU has been in crisis and the UN has been in crisis, and we have to reform it from the day that it has been established. That goes for both organizations. And I agree with that. It's actually true. I mean, by the way, I can say the same for the OSCE and for all the other. I don't know about SICA, I don't know it that well. I'm sure that Mr. Saribay will tell us later. But I'm sure that from the day that it was established, it needs the reform, right? So I think that the reform of any organization that includes more than one nation, but even within one nation, I'm sure reforms are needed. We are all the time listening to that. So when I hear UN reform, and I was participating in these discussions about the UN reform, my first sentence always is, I think that the UN for 80 years is a great success. So I think we should all start from that. Maybe now when we are looking at all the challenges that are there, particularly conflicts are the most visible ones, but of course there are others. When we see that the Middle East could not have been resolved, when we see that a permanent member of the Security Council just decides to attack unprovoked the neighboring country just because it decided, I don't know what they decided, but it's there and it is ruining the order. When we see what's happening in Africa, in Sudan, in all these other countries, yes, somebody may say, what is UN doing? And I very much agree with what Deputy Foreign Minister said. We tend to blame the UN for something that the member states are guilty for. And that's where we have to also look at the mirrors, and here I'm including all of my member states as well. We have to look in the mirror and look at what we are doing in order to prevent. And that's where my point is on what should we do now. And I think this pact that was established, the UN Pact for the Future, was actually probably exactly that. We have stopped as the member states and we have come to some conclusion, we need some more solidarity. It's not yet showing its result, but I think it's a pathway to show that we need to go back, maybe not back to the past, but back to respecting of the international norms, rules-based order, and not trying to look at the past and actually find and amplify our conflicts. And of course, this is always full of declarations. And I live now in Kazakhstan for 8 months, and I can only see the parallels between Kazakhstan and the European Union in the way that we are declaring our wish for peace, our wish for cooperation, our support for multilateralism. I think if you look around the world, you will see Central Asian countries, and Kazakhstan in particular, and the European Union as the strongest supporters of multilateralism, perhaps some other countries there as well, and we stand behind it with our declarations. Sometimes I'm wondering, are we also standing behind it with our facts, with our actions? Because Deputy Foreign Minister mentioned the double standards. I would also want to mention whataboutism. You know, it's like, okay, why would I have to do this if you don't do it, or if you do it this way? This is not the spirit. You're supposed to do it yourself for your own commitment. So that's another problem that we have now as member states that we have to deal with. And again, the third thing, this blaming of somebody else for something that you may yourself have to deal with. So I think when we are looking at what we should, in order to implement this pact and all the other possible declarations, including the climate and other challenges, we have to first put the mirror to ourselves, each country or each regional organization, everybody to ourselves, and see, are we rather finding the ways out of implementing this, or are we finding the ways how to implement it and work with other countries? Yes, it's a very idealistic statement, but I think that that's where the European Union will always come with the values first. And I know value is also a completely overrated word, but at the same time, I think that when we talk about the values, it's not only about talking about let's respect human rights and let us bring human rights to other nations. There's no such thing. But we are always wanting to through the international organizations, also say, you joined the international organization, we joined the international organization. This organization has certain rules. Rules is do not attack somebody else. Rule is respect human rights. Rule is respect territorial integrity. So we are supposed to follow these rules, and if you don't, there should be some kind of a punishment, and I'm wondering whether we are doing this punishment, because I see less and less respect for the International Court judgments. I see, as I said, respect from the UN Charter, and here, please allow me a little bit of a poisonous remark here. If a country attacks, if there is an illegal, unprovoked aggression on another country, the concept of neutrality, in my mind, or in the mind of the European Union, is not necessarily to say, okay, we are on no side. One has to be on the side of the victim. So that's where the European Union is coming from, and that's where we see our neutrality. We are partial to the UN Charter. And I think that's where, with that thought, I would perhaps like to conclude, and I hope that I have maybe provoked something with that. Thank you very much, and I wish you a good day.
Thanks. Thank you very much. So now I'll turn to Dr. Philippe Paulier, who serves as the Assistant Secretary General for Youth Affairs. When he was appointed in 2023 at the age of 32, he was the youngest senior official in UN history. I imagine that's still true today. A medical doctor, a variety of other backgrounds. We were talking about that earlier today. And now he's really trying to lead the UN Youth Office to bring in youth voices and the meaningful engagement of youth at in global policymaking. Felipe, you've been with us in Central Asia for the last couple of weeks. Please.
Thank you, Stephen, and I'm happy to be here. And first of all, thank you to the government of Kazakhstan for bringing us together. So I prepared something to share, but I'm tempted after the previous interventions to change a little bit things. But I think that's the intention of having a dialogue and not just speeches on our end. So I think that maybe, and thank you, Aleska, for the optimism also when we are looking into the future and the reform of the multilateral system, you know. Because I think it's very important to know where we are coming from, you know, to really not make the same mistakes, you know, and that's really the importance about history. But at the same time, it's very clear that there's things that need to change, you know. And we started the day with very strong interventions from two heads of state, you know. The president of Kazakhstan, you know, being very clear about the commitment of this country as a member state when it's about the UN values, but also the necessity to reform, you know, the current status quo of the organization, you know. At the same time, the president of North Macedonia was being very strong when she was saying, okay, you know, even though this system has a lot of imperfections, you know, a rule-based international order is the best solution for peace and development, you know. So maybe there's another one, but until this time of history, we haven't found a different one, you know. You know, so it's very clear that we need multilateral platforms, you know, and that's much more important for small nations and for middle-sized nations, you know. And I think that's what is currently at risk. It's a real risk, you know, and we need to defend, and we need especially those countries that really have been championing this platform for many, many years, you know. But at the same time, we need to see what's happening, you know, and it's inadmissible that 2024 was the year with the highest amount of conflicts ever since the Second World War. It's inadmissible that we are taking and we are accepting narratives that the only way when it's about peace and security is more budget for armies, you know. It's inadmissible, you know. And I think when we are looking about these reforms, these structural transformations for the UN in its 80th anniversary, yes, of course, there's a lot of things that are operational. There's a lot of things that must be done better, you know. And of course, there's many complexities about that. But then there's a part that is the substance part, you know, which is, okay, where are we going when it's about multilateralism, you know? And that's a fact for the future, you know. And you know, in a moment, you know, in a year where it seemed mission impossible to have an agreed, you know, text, an agreed document, and of course, you know, a document is not enough, then it's how we put that into action. But when it's about diplomacy and international law, it's a very substantive part of it. We had, you know, that commitment. We had heads of state last September going to the UN, reaffirming that the UN is an important platform, and committed to change at the same time, you know, committed to set, you know, a path when it's about which are those substantive transformations for the organization, you know, and we shouldn't be looking at UN at 80, you know, process of reform of the Secretary General separated from that substantive path, you know, because both of them are extremely aligned, you know. The truth is that, as Aleska was saying, you know, multilateral organizations, the UN, it's currently changing. It's constantly changing, and it needs to be constantly changing, you know, because it's a very complex platform also at the same time, you know. And one of the key parts, and I want to make my last point here, is in relation to how in this new multilateral order we bring young people and young people's participation. And we're not talking about, you know, continuing to organizing amazing things that might have been, you know, very progressive and revolutionary 10 years back, you know. We don't need to continue to bring and to create youth forums in parallel structures where the decision makers are taking, you know. That might have been the beginning, you know. And I'm an optimist, and I try always to look what's a half full glass. So instead of only being critical about where we are, it's really to say, okay, we've made a lot of progress, but the progress is not enough. It's not enough when half of the population is under 30 years old, and that's much more evident in certain parts of the world. And this part of the world is one of those central parts, where young people are the majority of the world's population. But the truth is that we have a huge percentage also of these young people that were born in a different world. So what they are expecting from institutions is different, What Gen Zs, what Gen Zs, what Gen Alpha are expecting from institutions is different because they were conceived, they were born in a different world, And that's where, this complex term of meaningful youth participation comes in. And that's where also why this is a big priority in the Pact of the Future. And that was also why member states decided to create a specific entity in the system to lead also this transformation, So our role, the role I have for some years of my career in the UN, and then someone else will come, and I'm sure it's going to be much more brighter than me. It's really about creating that structural transformation, again, an institutional response for the change, But let's don't think about participation as consultation. It's much more complex than that. And let's don't think about participation as kind of clashing of generations, Youth participation, it's about intergenerational solidarity. It's about intergenerational leadership. It's about recognizing that young people need to be partners of what we do. And that's actually what the Pact for the Future is representing as an intergovernmental negotiated document, How we put this into practice, that's the complexity. And that's where each of us, member states, UN entities, young and youth organizations, we need to understand, okay, which is our area of influence. We need to look into the mirror that Aleska was referring, and we need to say, okay, which is the part we need to put in practice, And actually, I think that's what we're trying to do, I think we shouldn't lose the hope about taking this chance, these 8 years of the UN, as an opportunity to continue to have an organization that is future fit and it's fit to purpose, And that's the case of the UN, We need to let's recognize there's many things that might be done better, but there's huge things that are extremely positively done by the UN, And it's contrafactic, to look into the past, but at least let's reflect about what would be the world now if we didn't have the UN.
I really appreciate the positive spirit that everybody's brought. So we have a very, very limited amount of time until my colleague Dina pulls some of us off the stage. I'll do this in a very undemocratic way. If you would like to ask a question, please stand up and ask your question. I'll recognize the gentleman in front of me. Kairat, please. And I just ask you to be brief in your question, but thank you so much.
Very brief question. Would you elaborate a bit more about the newly established UN Center in Almaty for Sustainable Development of Central Asia and Afghanistan? And what is the approach of the UN towards Afghanistan's current government? If you establish such center, which government you will engage? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for reminding me about this center. I was planning to speak about it, but it just somehow missed from my tongue. But yes, we are working on that, and many are aware of the creation of this center. It was established by the UNGA resolution, and now the ball is on the side of the Secretariat. Now we are waiting for some decision from the Secretary General, from his team, about the level, who will be heading this center, its mandate. But it's being considered jointly by different agencies within the United Nations, like DESA, UNDP, and many others, and of course the Secretary General's office. As far as the recognition of the Afghan government, you know that indeed the name of the center is United Nations Center for SDGs for Central Asia and Afghanistan. If I may just take back this history, The idea came up when it was pre-Taliban government, when it was Ghani's government, and we received support from them. But independently, the process of working on the resolution, on promoting this idea, was not connected to what was going on in Afghanistan. It was just parallel story. But eventually we adopted this resolution. GA adopted the resolution. By that time, government has changed in Afghanistan. And this changed government, Taliban government, of course, it's not recognized by the international community in terms of the full-fledged, UN member. But the de facto government, they also approved and confirmed their consent with the center. And now we have numerous, meetings, mutual meetings and visits. They come to Kazakhstan. You may have seen them on the margins of this forum. Our delegation, headed by the Deputy Prime Minister, also visit Afghanistan. We have established quite high-level trade. We are working on different aspects of that. Yesterday I had a meeting with Madame Rosa Otunbayeva. She just left the room, and we just wanted to find out the possible cooperation of the UNAMA and the hub or the center to be. So let us see. So it's not about recognizing them or not, but it's just about the delivery, the unified and I think coordinated delivery of the UN.
Minister, I am very sorry to cut you, but the only reason I am allowed to do this is where we're going now. So I'm going to take the other members of the panel. Thank you all so much. I apologize for a rather abrupt departure, but we unfortunately have to go to another meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you to all the panelists. Thanks to all of you.